So in, all Vedic practice, not just Vedic meditation, but all like Indian traditions that work with Sanskrit or work with the sounds of Sanskrit, we talk a lot about how there are specific properties in Sanskrit that make it a very powerful language for altering consciousness or a sacred invoking language. And there are actually studies and papers, if you're interested, on the Sanskritic effect, and different studies that have outlined qualities in Sanskrit that are not there in other invoking languages that we also know to be powerful and ancient in, kind of a spiritual sacred sense, whether that be Hebrew, Arabic, Aramaic, etc. What I do think is very important for anyone who is a Vedic meditator or anyone working with Sanskrit as a form of, sacred sound is just to know that while we can't always get into on like a molecular level, if you will, like in what it is about Sanskrit that is specifically altering this part of the brain or this state of consciousness, we can demonstrate with lab science that it is having a very specific effect on the physiology, thereby the consciousness. We do know that Sanskrit's the only invoking language that we at least know of that claims to be onomatopoeic, meaning that the form that it is invoking is inherently tied up in the sound, so that the word table in Sanskrit is actually a cousin of that primordial sound that in nature exists, that is like the kind of echo, if you will, of table. This underpins a lot of the philosophy with why sound, just when it washes over you, whether you're, in any kind of Vedic practice, is having an effect on you because of that onomatopoeic property of Sanskrit. There have been studies done, FMRI scans, where they play something like Sama Veda or Rig Veda for a patient, which are the sacred chanted Sanskritic texts that are pivotal in our tradition of Vedic meditation and its cousin traditions. And then they will compare that what lights up in the brain and what physiological state is activated to someone just listening to a cello sonata or some other chanting in another language. And what they find is that the default mode network, which we know is something that's also activated by psychedelic use or holotropic breath work, any kind of altered state of consciousness, actually gets lit up with listening to things like Sama Veda or Rig Veda. So we can't actually tell you exactly what is always being affected in terms of this part of the brain or this chemical reaction, but we can veritably see that this exposure to this language, this sound, and the whole gestalt of it is having a veritable effect on the body and thereby the consciousness in a way that a more controlled or neutral exposure to sound is not having.